recording. Okay. So what I started saying, to say hit record now, was that it's such a mystical chapter, this chapter, and that Mikra says that it thinks that the reason it's written in such a strange, esoteric manner is to convey firsthand to the learner and to the reader the experience that the junior prophets are going through in real time in the chapter, and that is, if you haven't received prophecy, you won't understand what we're talking about. But if you've received it, all the details will fall into place. So like that they said, like that's why it's written in such a way that if you're familiar with mystical experience, then what you're reading, you have enough cues to connect the dots and kind of be like, oh, okay, I get it. Which is what the prophets are being tested exactly in that way in this chapter, where it's like, if you know, you know, and if you don't know, I'm not telling you. Which is, again, very much the essence of all mystical experience. And it's not because of snobbery, and it's not because of like keeping it ivory tower exclusive. It's funny because like the Chinese and like the Asian cultures have a similar rule, which is like all the martial arts masters, right? So the rule is those that know don't talk, and those that talk don't know. That's the rule. Like if a person really knows the secrets, like they're not the ones that are just gonna like do workshops and blab on about it. So you see, it's like this. And the masters are the ones that it's like pulling wisdom teeth to get anything out of them. And again, in our own tradition, it's exactly like that until the Baal Shem Tov came along, right? And the reason for that is not to keep it exclusive in the snobby sense, but in the sense of true spiritual experience. It's funny because we spoke about this last time, is individual, right? Sapir, you had brought up the point saying, oh, that's so the opposite of science, where we're looking for uniformity, that kind of confirms the veracity of something or like the legitimacy of it. And spiritual experience is exactly the opposite, where it's completely individual. So it's true that there are certain common denominators, certain, cues or like signs, like along the path. But at the end of the day, it's individual depending on what's going on internally. And so, I mean, this is why the Gemara in Masechet Chagiga discussing about how is it permissible, or under which guidelines or criteria is it permissible to learn certain esoteric types of knowledge. So the chapter, it's called Ein Dorshin, and it says Ein Dorshin be'arios bishlosha. It's forbidden to discuss, intimacy with more than 3 people, meaning ostensibly a couple and one other third party that's kind of navigating, right? That's guiding. So like, for example, having a workshop, like sex therapy or whatever is completely asar al pi halacha. Because again, ein dorshin ba'arayot, again, arayot with ayin, not with aleph, bishlosha, and maise breishis b'shtayim, and maise merkava be'echad, which means, to, wait, did I get that right? Oh my goodness, where's the Mishnah? Yeah, that discussing the secrets of how God created the world. How does an infinite God do all the tzimtzumin and all the seder hishtalshelus to create the physical world, and all of creation? That's only a master and a student, right? B'shtayim. And then ein dorshin, like with the, like, meaning that even that, like a teacher cannot tell the student, this is how you become a prophet. Like, so what the Gemara says, mosrim lo roshei prakim, that all the teacher can do is pass on the chapter headings, like the basic guidelines, meaning if one of these 5 things doesn't pop up, you're hallucinating, or it's coming, from the Sitra Achra, like it's not legit. But the details, you can't spoon feed them because it's going to be strictly individual. As I said last time, the Gemara in Masechet Megillah says, just as no 2 prophets have the same face, so too they do not prophesy in an identical manner. That, like, just as their faces are completely individual and their DNA is individual, so too the way they're going to prophesy is going to be completely individualistic. So that's why, like, you can't teach somebody and then this is going to happen and then this is going to happen, and because it's like depending on so many things, it's just going to be different. So certain things will be in common, but then the details are going to be different. So that aside, what's going on in this chapter. So then I printed up your questions. So just warning that I had a very hard time preparing this class, just because of where I'm at emotionally in my own life right now, discussing Eliyahu's departure and everything the sages had to say about that. It just like was a punch in the face every single time I opened up another commentator. It was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this without breaking down. And Avi was like, it's okay. So you'll break down. Nothing will happen. So you'll cry and you'll blow your nose. It'll be okay. So you were warned. Anyway, yeah. So basically, one of the questions that, again, sorry you didn't ask, but I'm just going to preempt it, is kind of like, why does Eliyahu even have to die? Meaning, we know that God fired him. Okay, very nice. But why can't he just retire somewhere on a hilltop, either go to Eilat or go to the Golan and just sit in the Hermon and ski in the winter? Why does he have to go through this whole process of dying, or at least putting on the show of dying? Because we know that he doesn't actually die, right? We spoke last time about how, Sapir asked, oh, is he really, really old? And the answer is older than you think, right? Because he is Pinchas, who's been alive since Moshe Rabbeinu, and now we're already, over 500 years after Moshe, almost 600 years after Moshe Rabbeinu. And again, he's alive and kicking it to this day. I mean, he's busy boozing it up on Leila Seder, taking a sip of 15 million cups of wine globally, racking up those frequent flyer miles, going every Pesach Seder and every Havdalah and every Bris Milah. And so, so why put on this show of dying? What is the deal there? On to the questions. Then we get into your question, Sarah, which was, what's the deal with all the details of this show? Why do it this way? It's very, very strange. As you asked, what's the importance of the places that he goes to? What's the significance? And then the whole game that he plays with Elisha. What's going on there? Oh, just stay put. Don't move. I'll be right back. Right. And then Elisha's like, you think I'm going to fall for that? No. I know how you work. No. I'm not leaving your side. I swear by all that is holy and sacred, and I'm not leaving your side because I know it's not going to be good if I leave your side for even a second. So, I don't know. I literally was ping-ponging until the last minute. Are we going to do the last psukim of the crazy episode with the water and with the bears and with the boys who are making fun of him? So we'll see it depending on how this goes. Either we'll have a chance to get to it or not. Just as an aside for a second, where do you think the literary unit ends? Is chapter 2, according to the Christian division, is that chapter 2? And do we have a cue either way? That it is, that it isn't? Should I have asked you guys to read until a different spot? What do you think?
I would say before the people complain about the water.
What? That's a new chapter? You think so?
Oh no, it's still Jericho.
Well, again, in a play, right? How does one know when it's a new, if you were reading a play and the author took out every act 1, scene 3, act 2, scene 2, let's say they took it out, you would still totally know without that when there's a shift in act and scene. What gives you a clue? What cues you to that information? What is it?
Well, like a change of scenery.
Correct. The curtains close because they have to change the props and the sets, right? They have to, okay, the last scene was taking place in a kitchen in the Capulet Palace or whatever mansion. All of a sudden now we're at the Montague ballroom where they're throwing, the big ball. Like, they have to change the props and everything. And so just by changing the scene and you just know that that's a new scene because the setting is completely different because they have to change the sets. So that's one cue. Okay, does that work for Tanakh also in terms of like the units?
No, like doesn't it usually end with like somebody's life ending?
In Melachim, that's true. In Melachim, you have the literary conventions where that opens a story with, and this king sat on the throne when he was this many years old and his mother's name was, and he ruled for this many years, blah, blah, blah. And then it launches into his career, the highlights. And then it ends with, and he, was buried with his forefathers in the tomb of the house of David or the kings of the house of Israel, and his son ruled in his stead, yada yada, right? So where do we have those cues?
When do we have that here?
What?
Sorry, when do we have that here?
I'm asking because again, the whole point of this, like any class I give, is never just to kind of sit there spoon feeding lecturing, but as much as possible, even in tiny little ways, to convey skills. So again, at this point already, there should be developing a little bit, like some noticing the rhythm of the text. So I'm just kind of like taking the pulse now, like, is that coming across? There's no right or wrong answer. I'm just curious, if you guys are able to notice these things or identify it.
So I had also thought that was when Elisha threw the cloak and Yarden split and then he crossed over.
That's what? That's a new story? That's a new beginning?
That was like the end of the story of Eliyahu dying.
So you would end the chapter.
And then Elisha starts off on his own.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I would say like the line 23 should be a new chapter if anything. Like, and he went up from there to Bethel and he was going like meeting the new, like the little boys, like that just seems kind of random and aside.
Yes, but does it fit organically with the very next piece of content, which is the career of Yehoram, the son of Achav?
No.
Okay, so what would we do with the story with the bears? Where does it belong? Is it its own thing, or does it belong organically to, at least somewhat more naturally, to the unit before or to the unit after it?
Right, yeah, it belongs more in the unit before.
Good.
But if you're asking like, oh, like if there was a separation, where would it be? Then it would be there, but I guess it doesn't work here, no.
Right, so here the Christians actually got the division right, where, and we'll see in a second, when we trace Eliyahu and Elisha's footsteps, we'll see how the geography, is really one of the cues that tells us what is one literary unit. But here, just the fact that there's such a sharp tonal shift, V'yoram ben Achav malach al Yisrael b'Shomron, after we go through these series of trippy stories, right? Like, Perek Bet, and also somewhat the previous chapter, right, is also very mystical. So now the unit ends, and now we flip back to political, historical, very dry, less, like fantastical, and it's less in the fantasy section of the bookstore and more in the history section of the bookstore, right? So, and we'll see that it's interesting. It's going to ping pong back and forth. There are stories that are going to overlap specifically because of Elisha's career, and its essence. But with Eliyahu, it just keeps ping-ponging from Lord of the Rings, fantasy style stuff, to like dry history, and the king marched out to this war with this many chariots, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, I wasn't saying that the Christians were wrong here. I just wanted to toss it out there, put it on your radar, listening to the text and noticing the shifts, like where the tectonic plates, like, instead of the earth, like in the text itself, where you notice okay, there might be a bit of a crack, there might be a bit of a gap, might be a different continent. Okay, so I forgot to do this, before, so hopefully I'll do it quickly now. But just sketching out the cities. Maybe I'll just do it in real time in PowerPoint. But basically, the cities, when you guys think about places like Beit El, Yericho, Yarden, Gilgal, do you have an association with it? Is there something that comes to mind? And just start throwing the association.
Bethel is in Binyamin.
What?
I'm thinking modern Bethel though, like in Binyamin area.
No, so I'm asking specifically in Tanakh. Like, do we have associations in Tanakh with this?
Like what
These
happened
are places
in Bethel?
that hyperlink directly to other places in Tanakh. Again, there's one time that these places are mentioned, and we just read about in Parashat Shavuot 2 weeks ago.
Which I would know if I would study Parashat.
What do you mean? You don't have time to sit there doing chitas?
Oh my goodness gracious.
Ask me if in all my years of motherhood I have ever done chitas like in a systematic manner. I'm not talking about a week here, a week there. Like systematically for a whole year. I think I finished Hayom Yom like maybe twice in my entire life, like just literally every single day, like completing an entire cycle. Bajitas? In my dreams, maybe when I'm a grandma. Anyway, but yeah. So yeah, when you're a mom, it's like, it's beautiful for those that can do it, and I salute you, momish.
Okay, wait, but there we have the Avot there, right?
Thank you. Okay.
Yericho, dude, Yericho, walls falling down, Yeshua.
Okay, thank you. Good.
What else do we have? Gilgal, Shlomo. Gilgal is Shlomo, isn't it? No, hold on a second. That's Megiddo. He has his stables there. Okay, Gilgal, I give up. I knew
so let's start with Yericho, because that's the easiest one. That's the easiest, right? Yericho, we have when we click on that hyperlink, it redirects us immediately to the website of Sefer Yoshua, and for the record, all of these places do. The path that Eliyahu is treading is specifically echoing the book of Yoshua. Now, wait a second. Didn't I just say 2 seconds ago that it already hyperlinks to Parashat Shavuot from 2 weeks ago, which was Parashat Lech Lecha? So, hello, ma kasher. So it turns out that Yehoshua wasn't actually inventing a wheel, that he was just riding a wheel that was already invented for him. So this is what I didn't have a chance to do in advance, and I'm going to simply, hold on, let's just pause the recording for a sec. All right, God bless you guys for reminding me to hit record again now that the daf is ready. Okay, cut, take 3. Okay, fine, so we're gonna share screen now, again. Okay. Thank you, Sarah. All right.
Sorry.
So backtracking. Wow. Okay. So basically, as you guys see, Sefer Yoshua, Perek Bet. It's true that there's the story of Yoshua sending spies to Yericho, to Rachav, but that's not for the purpose directly of entering and conquering the land. That's more for spiritual tikkun, for Chet HaMeraglim. The first story in Sefer Yoshua where we actually start conquering the land is the Yarden. That's, we cross the Jordan in order to enter the land, and Hashem does the miracle of splitting the Jordan, right, where he makes it flow up to heaven. It makes it flow perpendicular to the land, up to heavens, so the Jewish people can cross through on dry land. And we had discussed, when I forgot to hit record again, that the reason Hashem did this miracle was in order to solidify Yeshua's confidence within himself, but also the people's confidence within Yeshua, that he genuinely has the right to fill Moshe Rabbeinu's humongous sandals. So the Yarden story in Yeshua is chapter 3 and 4. It ends off with God saying, we remember I gave you guys instructions. Don't just cross the Jordan and keep going. While you guys are crossing the Jordan, Yeshua, before you start crossing the Jordan, you're going to choose 12 people that are each going to haul a gigantic boulder from the riverbed of the Jordan. They're going to haul it out of the Jordan, and they're going to set it up as an altar in a place called Gilgal, a landmark. And basically that's what happens. Chapter 5, the 12 men set up the altar. I think it might be the end of chapter 4. They truly established the first Gilgal in Sefer Yoshua with the 12 rocks they pulled out of the riverbed from the Yarden when Hashem split it. And then basically they have to do bris milah. In chapter 5 it's described that they do a mass bris milah because for 38 and a half years the Jewish people did not perform bris milah because they thought it was putting the Jewish babies in danger, because it was unpredictable when Hashem was going to say to them that they have to travel. It could be they did a bris milah, and after 48 hours, God's like, okay, pack up the tents, we're moving on. And it's like, oy vey, it's the 3 days where it's dangerous for the baby to travel. He needs to be able to rest. So they just didn't do bris milah, except for Shevet Levi. Shevet Levi is not part of this mass circumcision in chapter 5 of Yoshua, because they were Moser Nefesh. They continued to do bris milah for 30 and a half years. They were like, we trust Hashem, that he's just not going to endanger the babies, that even if we have to travel, the babies will be safe. But we're not giving up on this mitzvah of bris milah. Whatever it will be, will be. So they do this mass circumcision. And Sarah, what else do you see in chapter 5? What else does it say? They perform the mass bris milah at Gilgal, and there's one other thing that they do. That's the reason they do bris milah, actually. Why do they do bris milah before they start conquering the land? What is bris milah prerequisite for? What's the continuation of the chapter?
Pesach.
Exactly, right? It's asur for an uncircumcised Jew to participate in Korban Pesach. And so basically, the reason that they do bris milah, what day did they cross the Jordan?
Does it say here?
It says Yud Nisan. So basically, conveniently, they happened to start conquering the land very, very close to Pesach. And so, oh wow, look at that, it's Pesach. Oy vey, it's Yud Nisan. We can't do Pesach in 4 days if we're uncircumcised. Quick, let's do a bris milah, and then we'll be able to do Pesach in 4 days. So that's very much what they are doing. And so then they hold the Pesach Seder. And again, ladies, according to the Gemara, it's the first Pesach Seder since they left Mitzrayim, which is pretty much inconceivable. But this is the reality, that they literally went through Yetzias Mitzrayim, did Pesach one time, and then for the next 40 years, they just didn't do Pesach because they didn't do bris milah. This is the first Pesach in 40 years. And then, now chapter 6 in Sefer Yoshua, if you guys are still with me, is the story of Yericho, with the walls falling down after they blow the shofar, etc., etc. And then chapter 7 is them approaching Beit El, right, with the battle against the nation of the Ai. Okay? So this is how the Jewish people entered the land, in this order. Yarden, Gilgal, Yericho, Beit El. Now, these places were not randomly selected or weren't just, convenient geographically. And this is why I mentioned, wait a second, but all these places hyperlink us to Parashat Shavuot from 2 weeks ago, Parashat Lech Lecha. When Avram Avinu enters the land for the first time in Parashat Lech Lecha, the description we are given in Perek Yud Bet, Pasuk Chet, Vayatek misham ahara mikedem leveit el, vayet ohalo, Beit El miyam v'ha'ai mikedem. So look how many places are mentioned that, again, overlap with Yoshua entering the land. And the Ramban says on Parashat Lech Lecha, saying this pasuk teaches us Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim. Avram Avinu received the prophecy that when his children enter the land, they're going to be going this path that you have before you in the chart, right, where it says Sefer Yoshua, or it says Yoshua. So what he did was, he walked there first, put his footprints down in the sand for us to simply put our footprints in there. Now, if you open up Rashi on Parashat Lech Lecha, on this pasuk, Rashi says something very interesting. Rashi quotes the Midrashim saying that Avram Avinu knew that there were going to be certain sins or bad karma that's going to occur, specifically in Yericho and in Ha'ai. So Avram Avinu said, I'm going to first lay down good karma for my children to hopefully head off some of the bad karma that I see prophetically is supposed to happen. So basically, Avram Avinu, this is how he enters the land in order to enable us, his children, to enter the land this way. Now, ladies, now we get to the meat and potatoes of, really you getting the most out of the hyperlinks in our chapter. So first of all, when you look at the column that says Eliyahu, everyone's with me? You guys see the share screen table?
Yeah.
Okay. So now, what is the order that Eliyahu is walking out of Israel? Because we know he's leaving Israel, right? How do we know that he's leaving Israel? Because again, where does he leave planet Earth? Like from which spot or after which event?
In Yericho, like crossing the Jordan. Sorry, not Yericho.
When you cross the Jordan, what is the significance of crossing the Jordan? When the Jewish people crossed the Jordan with Joshua, they were coming from where?
They were coming from Mitzrayim.
From Chutz La'aretz, exactly. The Jordan is the eastern gate into Israel. The Jordan is how you enter the land, or on the flip side, how you leave the land. So notice that Eliyahu is leaving the land because he crosses the Jordan, and then disappears from there. Okay, so now is there some kind of order? Like, do we see, is he mirroring, is he I guess mirroring is kind of funny because I meant it in the opposite. Like, is he following the exact same footsteps of Yoshua? Is he doing the opposite of Yoshua? Is there a method to the madness behind the stops where he's going?
We need to think about the stories, right?
No, you have the chart in front of you. I'm saying just look.
It's not directly opposite, right? Because in Yoshua's story, they started with Yarden, and then, right? Like Gilgal, and then Yericho. So it's not direct opposite.
No, it's not. That's the point.
That's why I thought that maybe it has to do with a story, with what happened in each place.
So we see that it's jumbled, right? He's not doing like the exact order point for point. By the way, contrasted with Elisha. After Elisha, so he crosses the Yarden, right? But then note, he mirrors, as in not like reflect exactly point for point, but the opposite, right? Eliyahu goes from Beit El, Yericho, Yarden, and Elisha does exactly the opposite. Yarden, Yericho, Beit El. Or if we actually zoom out, the last thing that Eliyahu does in Perek Aleph of Melachim Bet is he meets the groups of soldiers that are coming from the Shomron, right? And they're like on their way to Baal Zvuv. So Eliyahu starts off in Shomron, goes to Beit El, Gilgal, Beit El, Yericho, Yarden, and Elisha does exactly the opposite. So here there's a clear pattern. Yarden, Yericho, Beit El, Shomron / Har Carmel, which is how our chapter ends. So this already cues us in how chapter Bet is one homogeneous unit, because look how it doubles back on itself. Where Act 1, Scene 2, right? If I use this metaphor of Sefer Melachim Perek Bet, it opens with him, like with the confrontation, or being in the aftermath, the confrontation with the soldiers of Achaziah coming from the Shomron, and then he goes one way, and then the chapter ends. The very last pasuk of chapter 2 is Vayelech Misham El Har Carmel Misham Shav Shomron. He goes back to Shomron after doubling back on Eliyahu's path. So here we see a clear pattern, but here we see a balagan between Yoshua and Eliyahu. There's a balagan. So the question is, what's going on here? What is he trying to do? So there's many different interpretations. One interpretation I've learned is that there's a perception of Eliyahu as the ultimate curmudgeon, as the ultimate grouch or Grinch, that he is like the ultimate grudge holder against the Jewish people. So one opinion that I heard was that he's basically trying to revoke or to suspend the covenant that the Jewish people have to the land by saying, this is how you entered. I'm going to deliberately walk backwards in order to totally free this covenant, to levatel, to cancel it, because you guys don't even appreciate this covenant. Now, I'm not so sold on this argument for multiple reasons. I think it's a little more nuanced than that. But what I will say is that we see that he is definitely deliberately hearkening back to Sefer Yoshua. That we know. Now, why do we know this even before we look at the cities? Ladies, what is the first time that we meet Eliyahu Navi in Tanakh? Anyone remember way back when from Melachim Aleph? And I've harped on this a lot, so I'm just curious if somehow it's stuck. The first time we meet Eliyahu,
he does the whole
when?
Carmel thing, no?
Nope, before that. The chapter right before that.
Before that.
It's chapter 17, right? Perek Yuten Pasuk Aleph. He pops up from out of nowhere. After which story? The end of Perek Tet Zayin in Melachim Aleph.
The guy started rebuilding Yericho.
Bam! That's it. Why does Eliyahu Navi appear? Because basically you have this guy Chiel Beit Eli. Interesting, Chiel from Beit El. But what does he do? He decides to take the biggest axe to the covenant of the Jewish people, Hashem in the land, saying, Yoshua, you cursed whoever's going to rebuild Yericho, right? Perek Tet Zayin, whoever has the Tanakh in front of them, right? There's that whole crazy story about how he rebuilt Yericho, and we see Yoshua's curse from Perek Vav in Yoshua coming true. Right? בימיו בנה חיאל בית האלי את יריחו, באבירם בכורו יסדה, ובשגוב צעירו הציב דלתיה, כדבר השם אשר דיבר ביד יהושע בן נון. So note, Eliyahu comes perfectly full circle. He appears because of Yoshua and entering the land, and when he feels his time is time to go, that is exactly the magic Hogwarts spell that he needs to make in order to disappear as well. And just as suddenly as he appeared, because right after that pasuk, right, kasher kidbar Hashem asher diber biyad Yoshua ben Nun, vayomer Eliyahu tishbi mitoshavei Gilad. Hello, who are you? We don't know anything about you. We're supposed to assume we know this guy, but suddenly he pops up from out of nowhere, and he vows it's not going to rain until I say so. And suddenly the text is behaving as if we know this guy is. He just appeared from out of nowhere. And that's just as suddenly as he leaves the stage. He disappears just as abruptly and in the exact same context, because that is his shlichus. He appears when the Jewish people don't appreciate their covenant with the land and entering the land and everything that Yeshua laid down for us as a foundation. And then he hearkens that in order, before he leaves, he has to drive that message home. So note, like all of a sudden, poof, once again, he appears mystically, magically from out of nowhere. He's getting ready to leave in a storm, okay? And then he starts invoking the imagery of Yeshua saying, did you guys get the message? Do you understand why God sent me? Do you even understand? I came because of Chiel Beit Eli and Yeshua, and now, I have to remind you guys again. So why? Why does he have to remind them again? And we had said that at the end of the day, the reason he feels his time is ticking away. So in the last chapter, he burned all of those soldiers that were disdaining Nevuah and the Nevuah of Hashem by invoking the imagery of Har Carmel with the fireballs burning the Nevi'ei Baal. And here, he's again solidifying more imagery to try to make one last stand to the Jewish people, saying, look, I did my best, but you guys are literally buying yourselves one-way tickets to Galus if you don't learn to appreciate what your connection with the land is. Do you not understand that people who don't appreciate the land, that nation ceases to exist? You think you can exist being Jews without Eretz Yisrael? No, you don't understand. That's not really possible. So again, the question is, well, wait a second, we've been in Galus for 2,000 years. What happened? That's a whole other discussion. But in the time Eliyahu was living, being in Galus meant certain death and extinction of a nation, which is why the first time we were exiled, it was only 70 years. If it would be more than 70 years, I promise you there would not be a Jew alive today. 70 years was like, okay, we're about to go the way of the dinosaurs, no more Jewish people. So basically, he's invoking that. And again, it could be that he's going to Gilgal as a tikkun. Because if you recall, at what point does Hashem tell Eliyahu, you're fired? What is the episode that occurs that at the end of that episode, God just says, oh, forget it, you're fired. What does Eliyahu complain about?
I don't remember where, because clearly where is a big issue. No, I mean like where location. But he was just complaining that
he's at Har Sinai, right? It says he's in Chorev. He marches all the way from Haifa, all the way to northern Saudi Arabia to where Har Sinai is. He stands in Har Sinai and he says, God, your people are terrible. They are absolutely terrible. And what is his list, his litany of complaints? What is proof that the Jewish people are so terrible?
They have, they started building.
What?
That's right. They have raised your altars and have killed your prophets by the sword, such that I alone remained.
But you skipped the first sentence, which is they've abandoned your covenant. I mean, I'm just translating freestyle. Ki azvu britcha. And so our sages say they've stopped doing bris milah. Like, you can take it literally or you can take it figuratively. Like, oh, they've breached your covenant or they don't, they've abandoned your covenant. But our sages choose to read it literally. They don't do bris milah anymore. So here, he goes to Gilgal, he goes to Beitel, goes to Yericho to remind the people, but maybe also possibly to remind Hashem, saying bechol zot. But either way, he's going back to the roots saying, before I leave, I want you guys to understand why I'm here. I'm not here just to make your lives difficult. You guys are in clear and present danger of galus if you don't start valuing why you are in the land. What do you think your claim to the land is? You think you could just live here the same way the Greeks live in Greece and the way the French live in France? Do you not understand that's not the way it is to be a Jew in Israel? It's not the same. So either way, he retraces the steps. Now, Sarah, you had asked a very good question. You said, wait a second, what's significant of these cities? Is that where the Navi schools, the academies were? And the Malbim concurs with you. Not everybody says that. There's many different opinions. But the Malbim maintains, yes, of course, that's where he set up the academies. Now, I'm not sure how likely that is across the board for one simple reason. Beit El is one of the hot centers that Yerovam ben Nevat set up for one of the golden calves. Remember? So that's a major, major place of Avodah Zarah. Again, by Achab's time, not in Yeravam's time. But either way, Malbim definitely says, yeah, that's where the major academies were, which is why when he gets to these places, the throngs of his disciples and students come out and they immediately approach Elisha saying, did you get the text from God too? It's a horrible, horrible text. Did you get it? And so Elisha says, yes, I got it too. Shut up. Okay. So what is up with that? So basically, they get to these cities and they're met with hordes of students that are coming out and approaching Elisha, but keeping a distance from Eliyahu. Now, what is the, what's it called? Sorry, you asked a good question. One sec. No, something else. The interesting thing that the commentators point out is that the students speak very strangely to Elisha. Anyone notice that the way they turn to him and say to him, if he ask him if he got the text from God, they say, "Vayomru elav, hayadati ki hayom Hashem lokech et adonecha me'al roshecha," that God is taking your master from your head. What's the problem with that statement?
It sounds like Eliyahu was like a really tough character. Like,
okay.
I'm thinking like, ala roshecha, like.
No, but there's another difficulty within the pasuk. Because again, think about who's speaking to whom, right? You have the colleagues from the academies of Nevuah that Eliyahu set up. He's been training all of these people, right? And they're coming up to Elisha and they're saying, Lokech et Adonecha. What should they have said?
Oh.
From Adonenu.
Thank you. What do you mean? Like, they're all colleagues. They're all students. Eliyahu is the Rebbe of all of them. What is this? He's taking, Hashem is taking your master. What is it? Excuse me, he's not your master. All of these, he trained all of you. So what all of the commentators point out is that, well, you know what, before I say it, what dynamic are we sensing here? How are all of the throngs of prophets from the academies, how do they regard Elisha?
Maybe as like the new shiny, like master, and Eliyahu.
Master? Wait, Sapir. What, the new shiny what?
Prophet?
So is he a master or a prophet?
Well, I don't know. They seem to like kind of follow him more around than Eliyahu.
Wait, they follow him around with reverence, or like when they speak to him, do you hear reverence and respect, or do you hear something else?
It sounds mocking, like, do you not know that your master is about to die?
They're questioning his competence. They're saying, we received this text. Did you get it too? Now, what put together, they're saying your master, presumably not our master. So if they don't consider Eliyahu their master, how do they consider Eliyahu? As what to them?
Like, he's not with them. He's not part of their whole thing. Also, he's a new guy in the hood. Eliyahu just brought him out of nowhere.
That's exactly it.
Sort of like
Elisha's the newbie. That's the thing. They don't really respect Elisha because he's a noob. They've been with Eliyahu through thick and thin for years, who knows how long. And Elisha's just this noob. So that's why they're questioning his competence. So that's why they're saying your master, because look, we're basically Eliyahu's equals. And that's what the sages say, is that they literally felt at this point in our training, we are so advanced that Eliyahu's not our master anymore. I mean, it's true he's our teacher, he taught us, but we're basically equals. And Elisha, they look down on him like he's a newbie. And that's what they say, oh, you're master, because you're still the newbie in training. You're still, just tiranut, tiran. No, how do you say tiran in English?
Intern?
In basic training. That he's just a soldier in basic training. He hasn't even gotten his beret yet, his kumta. He's still got that pathetic olive green kumta that all the basic training kids, have. And so that dynamic, they're really questioning, they don't know, where does this Elisha figure, fit within what's going on, because, so that's why they're so confident. They're like, well, of course we received the text because we're already pros, but you're the newbie. Did you get the memo? Do you know? And so basically all these schools of prophets, wherever they're going, they're asking him this because everybody knows that this is the new hotshot newbie that won't leave Eliyahu's side. They don't understand what's up with that. I don't think they imagine for a second that he's going to be an heir. I don't think, because they're just it's not even possible. There are so many much more, advanced prophets that could take the throne, be the new dean of the academies. Why would it be this newbie? So they're just checking in, we see something's weird with you, Elisha, because we see you follow him around all the time, but what's your deal? So Eliyahu's being strange, where he's always trying to shake Elisha off of his trail, as he's been doing since day one, right? Even when Hashem tells him, go and make Elisha a prophet instead, he doesn't do it properly, as we discussed ad nauseum, right? He doesn't say, put his hands on Elisha's head and say, Yesimcha Elokim ki Ephraim u'kenashe Yamrecha Hashem yishmerecha. I hereby appoint you. Nothing. Flings, the cloak at him. Oops, it touched you. Oh, I don't know why. Just, carry on. I didn't do anything. No, stop. I'm leaving my mom and dad. I'm going to run. I didn't do anything to you. Leave me alone. What do you want? And there's just this weird cat and mouse game going on with the cloak, by the way. Did you guys pay attention? That again, same thing here. Everything about Eliyahu comes full circle. Everything. Not a detail is out of place. Just as he anointed Elisha with just a touch of a cloak, Elisha picks up that same cloak, and after he rips his own clothing in mourning for Eliyahu, his new clothing becomes that same cloak that touched him and made him a prophet to begin with, or they're just, lit the spark within him to start being able to study prophecy. So basically, they're going around to the different academies, and everybody's trying to understand what's going on, because they all sense that Eliyahu's departing, and they don't understand. If Elisha understands, maybe he's not trained enough to pick up those very delicate frequencies that they have been trained to pick up. They have these amazing satellite dishes that they've worked hard to build within themselves, so they can pick up the most delicate frequency. But Elisha, maybe he's just too much of a newbie. The interesting thing, the Malbim writes something that later the Hasidic masters, one of the Hasidic masters quotes word for word, without citing the Malbim. He just says Katuv Basfarim, but when I noticed what he says, I'm like, oh my God, he literally plagiarized the Malbim, which makes sense because the Malbim was a Hasidic master, but under the radar. So they all asked the question, how could it be? Elisha's on a higher level, we know he's on a higher level. How could they have a Hava Amina that he might not have gotten the memo that they all received? And so basically, they say, all Hasidic masters, quoting the Malbim, say that the relationship of Hasidim and Rebbe is of heart and body. And so when there's something wrong with the body, where is the first place a person feels that something's wrong? Where do you feel the pins and needles? Sapir, help us out. What is the first parts of the body to feel that something's wrong?
I'm not sure. Fever, headache, heart, chest pain.
No, think about it. The extremities, right? Pins and needles in the hands and in the feet.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Sure.
A person just doesn't suddenly the lungs stop working and the liver stops working. It's first, when there's a serious problem, they lose like they start getting the sensations in the extremities or losing sensation in the extremities, right? I mean, God forbid, think a heart attack, right? You know, the arm, the shoulder can go, you know, paralysis. And only later, all of a sudden, oh, wow, the inner organs, the vital organs, right? So that's what the Malbim writes, is that, like, they were feeling it, but because they were actually on the outskirts of the relationship with Eliyahu, whereas Elisha might have, because he was closer, they were curious, like, did you feel it? And he's like, even I felt it. That's how I know that Eliyahu's departure is so imminent, because I'm like an internal organ, and even I'm feeling it already. So basically, this leads us to the question, what's the deal with the dynamic between them? Why is Elisha telling them to be quiet? What, and this, the question I opened with, which is, why does Eliyahu even need to stage this whole dying thing? Like, what's going on here? So basically, the Malbim says that the reason that all of the students are so anxious is they understand that Eliyahu's leaving, but they don't know why. And that's what worries them. Because depending on why, that's going to tell them what their avoda is. What is their job to serve the Jewish people? The Malbim basically says a tzaddik can be taken by Hashem for one of two reasons. Either because the generation has fallen so low that they are not worthy to receive the light that this tzaddik brings down and dispels and shares with the whole generation. And so that's why Hashem takes a tzaddik, not as a punishment, but as a consequence for where the nation is holding, because we know that the leadership that a nation gets is a direct reflection of where they're at. And on the flip side, a leader is only given the spiritual levels that are necessary or fitting to serve the nation. So for example, in the Mishnah, it mentions that some of the Tanaim, I think it mentions Hillel maybe, that just according to Midos' work, he deserved to receive mamish nevuah, mamish prophecy. But the Gemara says the reason he didn't receive it is because the generation wasn't worthy. So he was deprived of prophecy because the generation was not on that level. And so the leader definitely is always there to serve the people. So he cannot receive light that isn't reflecting, you know, that isn't going to help him serve the nation. It's not about him just saying, oh, wow, look, I'm so cool, like I could do this. When you're a true leader, you're a Rebbe, right? Rosh B'nai Israel, it's not about you. At the end of the day, what is the brain? It is literally the center that all the nerves are connected to. So that's the thing, is like, it's just about serving the body, right? The brain is able to say, oh, we got a paper cut in our pinky on our left hand. That's why it hurts, right? Like the brain is saying, okay, this isn't dangerous, but this hurts. This is where the cut is. Quick, get a Band-Aid because it's bleeding. So that's why the leadership is intrinsically bound to the nation. So on the one hand, it could be that Eliyahu is being taken because the nation is sinking so low because of Achav and Achaziah and the very pessimistic chapter that we left off on Perak Aleph in Melachim Bet. Or the Malbim says a tzaddik sometimes leaves because he's finished the job that he needs to do in this world. He's attained a certain level of completion and perfection, and just individually, it's time for him to go. And because his soul, in order to continue doing what it needs to do, it needs to leave the body. Just like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, right? Why do we celebrate Lag BaOmer? Rabbi Shimon literally was ready to leave this earth and go up higher, you know, and become limitless and spread his light and his fire without the constrictions and limitations of a physical body, because of the work that he did for those 13 years in the cave. And that's it. He was now finished, and he could now move on and help the nation even more without being trapped in the confines of a body. So what they're really asking him is saying, Elisha, do you understand why? We know he's leaving, but did you get the memo why? Because none of us know why. Is it a punishment, in which case we have to serve the people one way? Or is it that Eliyahu's just simply completed his mission and it's not a punishment at all? It's just, that's it. And the light can still come down. We can still give light, you know, be these vessels and these pipes and give light to the Jewish people, and it's not a punishment at all. And Elisha says to them, be quiet, because they were davening for Eliyahu to stay alive. And he says, no, it's not a punishment. It's just that he's completed what he needs to. So don't daven for him to stay alive, to somehow avert the punishment to the people by keeping Eliyahu alive. Let him go. Like, just, as the Malbim puts it, hold on, where is it? Because he put it so beautifully. Here we go. V'lachen hecheshu, be quiet. V'lo titpalelu ke'eno mipnei ketzef v'charon af. It's not because, it's some kind of punishment Hashem's taking away the tzaddik, so the nation can't do teshuvah even more. But listen how he puts it. Ubehefech siluk ze nikra hilula simcha ki yasig shleimuto. This is exactly the words used to describe Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Lag BaOmer, that it's a hilula, yom simcha, where the soul is reunited, right? The kala is reunited with the chatan Hashem, and that the soul is now attaining higher levels of influence, being able to help the Jewish people even more. Okay, pat myself on the back for keeping it together. So far, so good. So basically, Elisha, he is now following Eliyahu, and he's trying to say, okay, I understand what's going on, but I'm trying to see what is the maximum way that I can help the Jewish people. And so basically, how does Eliyahu go up? How does he leave this world? What is the whole
chariot of fire and horses of fire?
Excellent. Why? Why is that the imagery chosen? There are so many different possibilities. It could have been on a cloud. It could have been...
It was supposed to be on a cloud, though. That's how we started. He was going to go in a se'ara. So why did we switch to fire?
Okay. So I will tell you the truth that what I'm about to say is not something I saw. What I did see, I can tell you the commentators, the way they explain it, is that the reason this was the vehicle chosen was the metaphor. It's supposed to be a metaphor for saying the Jewish people finally admitting, we understand who was protecting us this whole time. That you, Eliyahu, just one of you, is the equivalent of all of the chariots and all the horses that we could possibly have to march out in front of us, to protect us from Aram and from any other nation that wants to attack us. Saying that's why, what does Elisha cry out? Avi, Avi, Rechev Yisrael v'Parashav, right? That you are the chariot of the Jewish people. What does that mean? We understand that in what merit, who is protecting us this whole time? Why do we win all those battles against Aram? It was only your prayers. It was only you who was protecting us. It's like the equivalent of saying, you are the equivalent of 5,000, massive tanks. Like Eliyahu going up in a tank, with the cannon, ready to shoot the missiles, saying, we understand who is protecting us. But in light of what we spoke about last time about the stele, do you guys remember of, oh my God, who was it? I'm blanking on the name of the king of Assyria. It was Shalmaneser, I think. That he basically said, what was Achav famous for? Dafka in the time of Eliyahu, what was the state of the kingdom of Israel militarily? What was their standing in the Middle East? Is this ringing a bell at all?
Was it? Wait, horses was Shlomo, though, no?
That's true. But I had shown you guys last time the stele, the monument,
right,
where Shalmaneser was bragging, saying, I went to war against Aram and Achav HaYisraeli, and he spoke about how each nation marched out to war and what their contribution was. And when you look at the list of every nation and how many foot soldiers they sent out and how many chariots, Achav has the most chariots of every other, even more than Aram, because Aram has only 1,200 chariots, whereas Achav marches out with 2,000, almost double. So this era is when Israel is militarily, technologically advanced, more so than all the other nations in the region, so much so that even Shalmaneser is impressed with Achav, and he says, yes, and this is what I got in the booty and the spoils of war when I won against me. This is the special present, the mincha that he gave me. Not taxes exactly, but whatever, this is, I'm blanking on the word in English, is driving me sugar. The point is he's saying this is, what he paid me. And so basically, I think that when they think about Eliyahu, the imagery is very much of chariots because that personified Achav's entire career. is some kind of technological, like military advancement. So they're saying, we understand that it's not a chav. At the end of the day, you were the chariot, you were the tank. You were the one who's protecting us. And he goes up in fire because fire symbolizes Eliyahu from start to finish. Everything about him is fire. How does he kill Nevi'ei Baal? How does he, that's his entire function. When Hashem does in chapter 19 that whole ritual, like not ritual, division with the earthquake, and the very last sign, Esh, Loba Esh Hashem. So again, there's other explanations, which the Malbim and the Hasidic masters explain about why fire and why this, and we don't have time to get into it. But basically, Eliyahu goes up saying, this is my legacy, is that I always had your best interest at heart. It's not like I was literally out to get you. So then, just to finish off, Elisha, so sorry, you'd ask, who are the guys on the other side of the Jordan? Again, there are more disciples, and the disciples, like, they start looking for Eliyahu. What are they looking for? Because, like, they're saying, oh, where could he be? Now, they're used to this guy appearing and disappearing suddenly. What are they looking for?
Wine. No, I'm
what?
just kidding. Wine.
Wine? Why
That's
wine?
how we get him now.
What?
That's how we get him. No.
What do you mean?
Pesach and bris and everything.
No, why are they looking in the valleys and in the caves? They're like combing the countryside, looking everywhere. What are they looking for? They're not looking for his cloak because they see Elisha marching across the Jordan with the cloak. So they understand that this newbie was ultimately the one who was selected to be the dean of the academies and to be their new master. And it's interesting because they accept him.
So what is he looking for? What are they looking for?
So they're just looking to see if there is a body because they understand that, like, okay, he departed, but they want to bury him honorably, right? And because they can't entertain the idea that he went up body and soul. That the only thing he had to do in order to go to heaven, like to go to the spiritual realms, was to remove his physical clothing. That his body stopped being a garment for the soul. It actually became a part of the soul. And that's a whole other shiur. If we were to ever like study Eliyahu, in depth, that he's the one who attained the highest levels of zikuch haguf, of purification of the body, but not purification in the sense of not being defiled. Where the body stopped being a body, it became something spiritual. There's a discussion, why didn't Moshe Rabbeinu merit this? Why did Moshe's body, yes, their body is buried in Har Nevo, and only the soul passed on? What? Eliyahu was on a higher level than Moshe? And that's a whole other discussion, which we touched on very slightly, because we see that there's so many intersections between Moshe and Eliyahu, right? Eliyahu stays awake 40 days and 40 nights. He walks to Har Sinai. He also gets a revelation at Har Sinai that's similar to Moshe's revelation at Har Sinai after Chet Egel, etc., etc., etc. But that's a whole other discussion. But Eliyahu, the body and the soul go up because all he has to do to leave this physical world is to disrobe. And so Elisha takes the garment, right? Pun intended, or double entendre intended. And he puts on Eliyahu's garments, thought, speech, and action, right? The levushim, in order to embark on a career, to continue leading him. Now, the last thing that Elisha says to Eliyahu, and Eliyahu asks him, so what do you want? What does he answer him? He says, what Eliyahu says, what final wish can I grant you before I leave?
He says,
I want to be double of your spiritual power. So what does that even mean? What is he asking for? So our sages say one explanation is, I want to be able to perform double the amount of miracles that you performed. Okay, and we will see over the next several chapters point for point, that literally happens. How many humans did Eliyahu resurrect in his lifetime?
One kid.
Correct. What?
It was a kid, no? Wasn't it a kid?
Who did that child grow up to be? In
Yonah.
Zion? What?
Yonah.
Excellent, exactly. So we shall see that Elisha resurrects two people, and one of them goes on to be one of the Treyasar, one of the prophets from the Treyasar. So we'll see point for point, that he's really going to perform double. But on another level, he's saying that you were mostly Gvura, you were fire, but I want to be Rachamim too. I want the gift of being able to nail, to not be a pushover, to not just be chesed, because that's not going to help the people. That's not constructive. I want to be able to master Rachamim, which is the balance of chesed and gvura. The perfect. I want to be, and that's really the secret of doing double the miracles. It's not about being able to, I have a bigger magic wand than you. It's not about that. It's that I want to be able to be mashpia on them more effectively. Because Eliyahu, because of your avoda, there are certain things I'm not going to be able to do. I'm not going to reach your levels. My body is going to die. I'm not going to go up to heaven, body and soul, and we will see. Elisha even gets sick, right? He does not attain zikuch haguf, but not because he's on a lower level. He just says, I want to serve the people in a way that you did not, because it wasn't your bechina, it wasn't your character, it wasn't your role. So Eliyahu says, well, if you see me go up, then that means you will get your wish. Why? What does that mean?
That one I really didn't understand. What could it possibly be?
There are many, many opinions on every single, every question you sent me, Sarah. Initially, when I started looking over the, psukim, or the commentators, what I do is I print up your question, I sit there jotting down notes, next to each question. Every single sentence has next to it the word machloket. Machloket. And then it's okay, so choose for the shiur which opinion you're going to quote and which one you're going to omit. Right? So, literally every single question you sent, machloket. Okay, so what do I present? So, on the one hand, right? So this too, machloket, about how to perceive, this dynamic. But the opinion that I saw, I'm trying to remember, I think was it the Malbim? I think it was, because I consistently liked the way he tackled this entire sugya. He basically says, it's the Malbim, where he says that basically when a soul is in a body, so it's limited to how much it can be mashpia, how much it can give. It can only give according to its limitations. But when the soul leaves the body, or when it stops being in this physical world, because again, Eliyahu's soul never left his body, right? But when it stops being a physical presence in this world, then suddenly it's no longer limited and it can be mashpia, more power. So he basically says, if you only see me, if you only are able to receive hashpah when I'm here, it means our hiskashrus, our connection, isn't enough that I can grant you power when I'm no longer here. But if you and I are truly connected, you've cultivated a hiskashrus to me, that you even see me ascend, then from that place up there, I will be able to continue giving you shefa beyond my limitations from when you and I were walking together. So it really depends on how connected we are. So it's not like some kind of Hogwarts test of, it's how connected are you to me? Because when I'm physically here, I'm limited. I can't give you the double, even if I wanted to, because the rule is I can only give you what I have. But when I'm physically not here, if you and I are truly bound to each other, then I can give you so much more. I can give you outside of my limitations. And so that's basically it, that because Elisha mevatel himself completely to Eliyahu, right? Eliyahu tried to, shuck him off. I didn't do anything to you. And Elisha's like, no, I'm leaving my mom and dad. I'm running after you. By the way, it's interesting that when Eliyahu ascends, what does he yell? Avi, Avi. my father, right? He leaves his parents. And again, there's a whole explanation why he yells, my father. For the record, at every funeral for a great tzaddik, Talmid Chacham, a great leader, to this day we eulogize them, Avi Avi Rechev Yisrael v'Farashav. Whenever, like Rabbi Ovadia Yosef Mordechai Eliyahu, when they pass on, we always say this pasuk, my father, you are the chariot and the driver, like, of the Jewish people. Echoing Elisha eulogizing Eliyahu. This has become the term that we use for every tzaddik. So basically, it's all about his kashrus, and that's really the takeaway, is that because the students, all of these students, they might have like sat there in the academies diligently taking notes and, been very good, like good little boys in the academy. They didn't cultivate a kashrus. And that's why even after Gimel Tammuz, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, if a person cultivated a connection, then it still goes on, right? Or after Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, right? As we celebrate Lag BaOmer, is at the end of the day, a person isn't limited to that. And so the goal is really to tap into the essential connection, because then the soul truly stays connected. So for me personally, that's been the challenge, is because there are certain people that have departed that I'm able to tap into these kashrus, and certain people where I just feel they've disappeared. And again, there's an explanation. Like my mashpia was a nistar. So I asked my son, I was like, I don't feel him anymore. I don't sense him. Like when Rav Steinfeld passed away, I still sensed him. I sensed how happy he was to be with the Rebbe. I literally felt the simcha. So I wasn't so sad for him. I was actually happy that he was reunited with his Rebbe. And I still felt, but when my mashpia passed on, I asked my son, I'm like, Yosef, why? I feel like someone hung up on me. And I keep dialing the number, and it keeps saying, this line has been disconnected. And that's what was just like totally so painful, was why can't I dial? Like, why can't the phone even ring? And my son said that's how it is with tzaddik nistar, is that they really, it's different. When a person is a revealed tzaddik, it's easier to tap into him than a nistar. So that's just something I had to get off my chest. Sorry if it's completely not related. So sometimes it's a little more challenging to, feel that he's kashrus. For a very long time after Gimel Tammuz, I had a hard time connecting to the Rebbe. And again, thank God, through Avoda, I was able to understand what was making that blockage and to free it up and to open it up. But that's really the crazy thing about Judaism, is that we don't believe that death is the end. It's just a question of cultivating the life in order for that connection to continue even after the soul and the body are not obviously together, and that the accessibility isn't the same. And it's not always the same. It's not always the same. Anyway, so on that somewhat melancholy but optimistic note, now we embark on some really, really actually beautiful, very optimistic chapters where we see Elisha's career, and it's unbelievable. It's just beautiful. Again, it's not all rainbows and butterflies, but it's beautiful. And again, because he's literally channeling Eliyahu, but with a twist, with that double portion of the positivity that Eliyahu wasn't able, because of his essence, that he wasn't able to bring down. So next time we'll take a look at what's the story with the bears, with those 42 boys, why 42? Questions all duly noted, but we'll tackle it next time when we start looking into Elisha's career. Alrighty, take care.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you for everything, Shabbat.